When the stagecoach doors opened, Ethan Calloway's entire future collapsed in an instant. The mail-order bride he'd been expecting, delicate, refined, proper, wasn't what stepped onto that dusty platform. What arrived instead was a woman the whole town would mock, a body they'd whisper about, and a choice that would define everything he thought he knew about himself. This is a story about the moment when expectation meets reality, and one man has to decide what truly matters. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The heat that afternoon wasn't just uncomfortable, it was punishing. The kind that made sweat pool in the hollow of your collarbone before you'd even stepped outside. Ethan Calloway stood on the platform of Ashford Station, hat in hand, feeling that moisture gather at his temples, his collar already damp against his neck. Around him, the small crowd had assembled with that particular energy people get when they're pretending not to stare, but absolutely staring. "She'll be a real looker, Ethan," Samuel Pritchard said from somewhere to his left. Samuel owned the general store and had opinions about everything. "All them Eastern ladies are. Refined. Probably knows French." Ethan didn't respond. His throat felt tight. "Long as she can cook, that's what matters," Mrs. Brennan added, fanning herself with her hand. "A man needs feeding, refined or not." The stagecoach was late. 23 minutes late, according to the pocket watch Ethan kept checking, even though time wasn't going to speed up just because he stared at it. He'd worn his good vest, brushed his boots, even trimmed his beard that morning, standing in front of the cracked mirror in his bedroom, trying to look like the kind of man a proper woman might want. The advertisement had been simple enough. Seeking companionship. Rancher 32, established property, looking for a woman of good character willing to build a life on the frontier. He'd sent it east through a matrimonial agency, paid the fee, and waited. The letters that came back were neat, careful. Lydia Harper, 26. Educated. Her handwriting had loops that suggested patience, care. She'd included a small sketch of a bird in one letter, just a robin, nothing fancy, but it had made him smile. He'd imagined her 100 different ways. Blonde, maybe. Or dark-haired with those sharp Eastern features. Slight build, the kind of woman who'd look good in the dresses they sold in the catalogs, all lace and buttons. The stagecoach finally appeared through the dust, horses laboring, wheels grinding. The crowd shifted forward. Ethan's chest tightened. The driver pulled the brake with a screech that set teeth on edge. Dust billowed. The door opened, and everything Ethan had imagined shattered like dropped glass. The woman who stepped down wasn't slight. She wasn't delicate. She was broad-shouldered, heavy-set. Her dress, wrinkled and stained from travel, stretched tight across her body. Her face was flushed, hair stuck to her forehead in damp strands. She moved carefully, slowly, as if aware that every eye in Ashford was locked on her. Behind her, an older woman appeared in the doorway, frail, trembling. Lydia turned immediately, offering her arm. "Mama, careful now. Steps higher than it looks." The crowd went silent. Not the comfortable silence of anticipation. The ugly silence of judgment forming in real time. Ethan felt it. Felt them all looking at her, then at him, then back at her. Felt the weight of their thoughts pressing down like the heat. Samuel Pritchard let out a low whistle. "Well, that's unexpected." Mrs. Brennan's fan stopped moving. Lydia helped her mother down, then turned. Her eyes found Ethan's across the platform. For a moment, neither of them moved. Her expression was careful, guarded. She'd done this before, he realized. Walked into rooms and felt the air change. Seen the looks, heard the whispers. She straightened her shoulders. "Mr. Calloway." Her voice was steadier than he expected, direct, no apology in it. "Yes." His own voice came out rough. "Miss Harper." "This is my mother, Eleanor Harper." The older woman looked up at him with watery eyes. She was thin, too thin, and her hands shook as she gripped Lydia's arm. "Ma'am," Ethan managed. "I know this isn't what you expected," Lydia said, and there it was, the acknowledgement hanging between them like smoke. "The agency, they didn't know I was bringing Mama. I wrote you a letter explaining, but I suppose it didn't arrive in time." Ethan's mind was racing. The house had 2 bedrooms. He'd prepared one, just one. The supplies he'd bought were for 2 people. the clothes he'd ordered from the catalog. I can work, Lydia continued, her chin lifted slightly. I'm strong. I don't need much. Mama's recovering from pneumonia, but she can sew. She's good with a needle. We won't be a burden. She's a big girl, someone muttered from the crowd. Ethan didn't catch who. Lydia heard it. He saw it in the way her jaw tightened, the small flinch she tried to hide. Something hot and sharp moved through Ethan's chest. Not anger exactly, something deeper. He looked at this woman, this stranger who'd traveled across the country with her sick mother, who stood there in the blazing heat being judged by people who didn't know a damn thing about her. And he made a choice. My home has room for both, he said. The crowd stirred. Lydia blinked. What? I said my home has room for both. He stepped forward, picking up the 2 battered trunks the driver had unloaded. We should get your mother out of this heat. Mr. Calloway, I don't think you understand. I understand fine. He met her eyes. You came a long way. You're tired. Your mother's sick. Let's go. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Ethan drove the wagon while Lydia sat in the back with her mother, shielding the older woman from the sun with her own body. He caught glimpses of them in his peripheral vision. Lydia's broad back, Eleanor's pale face, the way Lydia kept adjusting the blanket around her mother's shoulders despite the heat. The ranch house appeared over the hill, and Ethan felt a twist of embarrassment. It was solid enough. He'd built it himself 3 years ago, but it wasn't fancy. Single story, wood frame, a porch that needed new boards. The barn was bigger than the house. The chicken coop leaned slightly to the left. It's not much, he said as he pulled the wagon to a stop. It's more than nothing, Lydia replied. He helped Eleanor down first. The woman weighed almost nothing, like helping a child. Lydia came after, waving off his offered hand. Inside, the house was stifling. Ethan had left the windows closed to keep the dust out. He moved quickly, throwing them open while Lydia settled her mother into the rocking chair by the cold fireplace. There's a bedroom there, Ethan said, pointing. I'll set up something else for myself. You and your mother take it. Lydia looked at him. Where will you sleep? Barn's fine. The barn. I've slept in worse. She studied him for a long moment, and he couldn't read her expression. Then she turned back to her mother, smoothing the older woman's hair. Thank you, she said quietly. That first night, Ethan did sleep in the barn. He lay in the loft, staring at the rafters, listening to the horses shuffle below. His mind wouldn't stop moving. What had he done? What was he going to do with 2 women, one of them sick? How was this supposed to work? He kept seeing Lydia's face when she'd stepped off that stagecoach, the way she'd held herself, the way the crowd had looked at her, the way he'd looked at her. He felt sick about it, ashamed, because in that first moment, he'd been just like them, disappointed, shocked, already calculating how to get out of this arrangement. Then she'd spoken, and something had shifted. Morning came too early. Ethan woke to the sound of movement from the house. He climbed down from the loft, brushed hay from his clothes, and walked across the yard. The smell hit him first. Coffee. Then bacon. He opened the door to find Lydia at the stove, her hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up. The kitchen, which had been a disaster of dirty dishes and empty cans, was spotless. The table was set. Bacon sizzled in the pan. You're up, she said without turning around. You didn't have to. We're eating, aren't we? She cracked eggs into the pan with practiced efficiency. Mama's still sleeping. She needs it. Ethan stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do with his hands. Sit down, Mr. Calloway. Food's almost ready. He sat, watched her work. She moved around the kitchen like she owned it, finding things he didn't remember having, making space where there wasn't any. How'd you sleep? She asked. Fine. Liar. She brought plates to the table, loaded with more food than he usually ate in 2 days. Barn's no place for sleeping. We'll figure something better out. Miss Harper. Lydia. She sat down across from him. If we're going to do this, whatever this is, you should call me Lydia. Lydia. The name felt strange in his mouth. I'm Ethan. I know. They ate in silence for a while. The food was good, better than good. The eggs were cooked perfect. The bacon was crisp. Even the coffee tasted better than what he usually made. Your letters, Ethan said finally. You never mentioned that I'm fat? Lydia's tone was matter of fact. No, I didn't. Would you have agreed to marry me if I had? The bluntness caught him off guard. I don't know. At least you're honest. She took a sip of coffee. The agency said I should send a photograph. I told them I didn't have one. They said that was fine. Plenty of women don't. What they meant was, most men don't actually care what their brides look like as long as they're useful. That's not, isn't it? She looked at him directly. You needed a wife. I needed a way west. Mama needed somewhere safe to recover. It was practical. Still is, far as I'm concerned. Ethan set down his fork. Why did you bring her? Because there was no one else. Lydia's voice didn't waver. My father died 2 years ago. Pneumonia took Mama hard this winter. My brothers moved to Chicago, got factory jobs. They sent money when they could, but it wasn't enough. The boarding house where we were staying, she paused. The landlady made it clear we weren't welcome anymore. Too much burden, too much space taken up. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not. She stood, collecting the plates. I don't need pity, Ethan. I need to know if this arrangement is going to work or if you're going to put us back on that stagecoach. The question hung in the air. Ethan thought about the town, about Samuel Pritchard's whistle, about the way Mrs. Brennan had stopped fanning herself, about how it would feel to walk into church on Sunday with Lydia beside him, knowing what everyone would say. Then he thought about the clean kitchen, the good food, the way Lydia had held her mother so carefully. Stay, he said. She turned. What? Stay. Both of you. We'll figure it out. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. He stood, meeting her eyes. But I'm saying it anyway. Stay. Lydia stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, sharp and final. All right then. We'll stay. The days that followed developed their own rhythm. Ethan would wake before dawn, do the morning chores, feeding the horses, checking the fence lines, hauling water from the well. By the time he came back, breakfast would be ready. Lydia cooked. Eleanor sat in her chair, sewing when her hands were steady enough. It wasn't comfortable exactly, more like three strangers learning to exist in the same space without colliding. Lydia didn't talk much. She worked. Constantly. The house transformed under her hands. Curtains appeared in the windows, rugs got beaten clean, the porch got swept twice a day. She took over the vegetable garden, which had been dying from neglect, and somehow coaxed it back to life. She was strong, genuinely strong. Ethan came back one afternoon to find her hauling a full water barrel across the yard by herself, face red with effort, but jaw set. Let me help. I've got it. Lydia, I said I've got it. She did. Barely. But she did. Eleanor improved slowly. Color came back to her cheeks. Her hands steadied. She started sewing in earnest, mending Ethan's torn shirts, then making new ones from fabric Lydia somehow acquired. The two women had their own language, spoken in glances and small gestures. Ethan watched them sometimes, feeling like an outsider in his own home. Town was harder. The first time Ethan brought Lydia to Ashford, they needed supplies, and Eleanor wasn't well enough to be left alone for long. The stairs started before they'd even climbed down from the wagon. Morning, Ethan, Samuel Pritchard called from the store entrance. His eyes slid to Lydia, then away. Ma'am. Inside, the whispers were barely whispers at all. Didn't expect someone so... Poor man. Can she even fit through the door? Lydia's face remained perfectly neutral. She walked through the store selecting items, flour, sugar, coffee, fabric for Eleanor, as if she couldn't hear any of it. Her hand was steady when she counted out money. Her voice was level when she thanked Samuel. But in the wagon on the way back, she was silent, completely silent. And Ethan saw the way she held herself, rigid and contained, like someone trying not to break. They don't know you, he said finally. They don't want to know me. Her voice was flat. They've already decided what I am. What you are is strong, capable. You've kept this place running better in 2 weeks than I have in 3 years. She looked at him, surprised. You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it to be nice. I'm saying it because it's true. Something shifted in her expression, but before she could respond, the wagon hit a rut, and they both grabbed the seat to steady themselves. 3 weeks in, Eleanor spoke to Ethan directly for the first time since they'd arrived. "You're a good man," she said. She was sitting in her chair, working on a shirt. Her voice was thin, but clear. Ethan looked up from the ledger he'd been struggling with. "Ma'am?" "My daughter." Eleanor's hands kept moving, needle flashing. "She's had a hard life, harder than most. Our family, we didn't have much. Her father and I, we tried our best, but when you're poor, trying your best sometimes isn't enough. Mrs. Harper, she was always big, even as a girl. The other children," Eleanor's voice caught. "Children are cruel. And then she grew up, and adults aren't much better. She learned to work hard because that was the only value people would see in her, the only worth they'd allow her to have." Ethan set down his pen. "I'm telling you this," Eleanor continued, "because I see how you look at her, like you're still trying to figure out what to do with us. And I want you to know, my Lydia, she doesn't expect much. She's never been given much. But she deserves everything." The words settled heavy in the room. "I know," Ethan said quietly. Eleanor finally looked up, meeting his eyes. "Do you?" That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay in the barn loft. They still hadn't figured out a better arrangement, and thought about Eleanor's words, about Lydia hauling water barrels and cooking meals and cleaning the house and pretending she couldn't hear the whispers in town, about the fact that in 3 weeks she'd never once asked him for anything. The next morning, he made a decision. "I'm building an addition," he announced at breakfast. Lydia looked up from her eggs. "What?" "Another room, off the back. You and your mother shouldn't have to share that small bedroom. And I'm tired of the barn." "Ethan, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to." She stared at him. "Why?" "Because you deserve a real room. Both of you. And because..." He hesitated. "Because if this is going to be your home, it should feel like one." Lydia's throat moved as she swallowed. Eleanor reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. "Thank you," Lydia said, and her voice was rougher than usual. Building took time. Ethan worked on it in the evenings after the day's ranch work was done. Lydia helped when he'd let her, which wasn't often. He was stubborn about accepting her labor for this particular project. But she'd bring him water, hold boards steady, pass him nails. They talked during those hours. Small things at first. Weather, crops, the horses. Then bigger things. "Where'd you learn to cook like that?" Ethan asked one evening, hammering a crossbeam into place. "My mother mostly. A necessity. When you're feeding a family on almost nothing, you get creative." She wiped sweat from her forehead. "I worked in a boarding house kitchen for a while. 6 years. That taught me efficiency." "Why'd you leave?" "Got fired." She said it without inflection. "The owner's son took an interest. I wasn't interested back. He didn't like that. Told his mother I was stealing. I wasn't, but she believed him. That's when I started writing to the matrimonial agency." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What was his name?" "Why? You planning to ride back east and punch him?" "Maybe." She laughed, actually laughed, and it transformed her face. "He's not worth the trip. Besides, if I hadn't gotten fired, I wouldn't be here." "Is that a good thing?" Lydia was quiet for a moment. "Ask me in a few months." Another evening, she asked him about the ranch. "How'd you end up out here? You don't talk like you were born frontier." "I wasn't. Pennsylvania. My father was a preacher. Wanted me to follow in his footsteps." "But you didn't." "No." Ethan set down his hammer. "I tried. For a while. Went to seminary, studied, did everything he wanted. Then I realized I didn't believe any of it. Or maybe I believed it, but I didn't want to spend my life telling other people what to believe." "That must have gone over well." "It didn't. We had a fight, a bad one. He told me if I left, I shouldn't come back." Ethan picked at a splinter in the wood. "So I didn't. Came west, worked as a ranch hand for a few years, saved up, bought this place, built this house with my own hands. Never rode home. Do you regret it?" "Which part?" "Any of it." Ethan considered. No, I don't think I do. I'm not good at following other people's plans. Never have been. Then why'd you send for a mail-order bride? That's someone else's plan, isn't it? The agency's plan? He looked at her. Because I was lonely. And I thought maybe if someone chose to be here, chose this life, it would feel less like failure. Does it? I don't know yet, he admitted. Ask me in a few months. She smiled at that, small but real. The addition took 3 weeks to finish. When it was done, Ethan moved his things into the new room. It was smaller than the original bedroom, but it was his. Private. The walls still smelled like fresh-cut wood. Eleanor got the original bedroom to herself. Lydia took the small room that had been intended as a storage, and she made it hers with astonishing speed. Curtains, a rug, her mother's extra quilts folded at the foot of the bed. That night, for the first time since they'd arrived, everyone slept under the same roof in their own space. It felt like something had settled, shifted into place, but the town hadn't changed its mind. Sunday came, and Ethan made another decision. We're going to church, he said at breakfast. Lydia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. What? Church. All of us. Your mother's well enough now, and it's time we stopped hiding. We're not hiding, aren't we? Ethan set down his coffee. I haven't been to town except for supplies in a month. You've been once. We've been avoiding them, and that's only making it worse. Ethan, you don't know what it's like. You're right, I don't. But I know what it looks like when you let people make you feel small, and I know I'm tired of it. He stood. So we're going, together, and if anyone has something to say, they can say it to my face. Eleanor spoke up from her chair. I'll need my blue dress pressed. Lydia looked between them, something complicated crossing her face. Then she sighed. Fine, but when this goes badly, don't say I didn't warn you. The church stood on the edge of Ashford, white-clabbered with a bell tower that leaned slightly east. People were already gathering when the wagon rolled up, families in their Sunday best, children running between the adults, the whole town on display. The crowd noticed them immediately. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Someone, Ethan thought it might have been Mrs. Brennan, actually gasped. Lydia's shoulders went rigid. Ethan climbed down, then helped Eleanor. When he turned to help Lydia, she was already down, her jaw set like she was walking to execution. Hold your head up, Eleanor whispered to her daughter. They walked toward the church entrance. The crowd parted like water, creating a corridor of stairs and silence. Then Samuel Pritchard stepped forward. Morning, Ethan. His tone was friendly enough, but his eyes were assessing. Didn't expect to see you here. It's Sunday, Ethan replied evenly. We go to church on Sundays. Of course, of course. Samuel's gaze moved to Lydia, then away. Ma'am. They made it inside, found a pew near the back, sat down. The whispers started immediately. Never seen anyone quite so... He actually brought her. Poor man must be desperate. Lydia stared straight ahead, her hands folded in her lap. Eleanor patted her arm. Ethan felt rage building in his chest, hot and bright and useless. The service started. Reverend Patterson, an older man with a voice that carried, stood at the pulpit. Today's sermon, he began, is about judgment. Ethan almost laughed at the irony. Matthew, chapter 7, judge not that ye be not judged. Patterson's eyes swept the congregation. We live in a harsh world. This frontier demands toughness, demands strength, but sometimes, in our pursuit of survival, we forget compassion. We forget that every person, every single soul, is made in the divine image. That worth isn't measured by appearance or circumstance, but by character. The church had gone very quiet. I see strangers among us today, Patterson continued, new members of our community, and I wonder, have we welcomed them as we should? Have we shown them the Christian charity we claim to value? Or have we judged them before knowing them? Someone coughed. Mrs. Brennan's fan started moving again. Let us remember, Patterson said, that the strongest among us are often those who face the harshest trials, that true character reveals itself not in comfort, but in adversity, and that if we cannot see the worth in every person, perhaps the failing is in our vision, not in them. After the service, as people filed out, something strange happened. Reverend Patterson stopped them at the door. "Mrs. Harper," he said to Eleanor, "I heard you're skilled with a needle. The church could use new altar cloths. Would you be willing?" Eleanor blinked. Yes, of course." "Wonderful. And Miss Harper," he turned to Lydia, "I understand you've brought new life to the Calloway Ranch. We could use someone with your capability on the church grounds committee. Would you consider it?" Lydia looked genuinely shocked. I'm not sure I'm sure you'd be perfect." Patterson smiled. "Ethan, good to see you back." "Reverend." It wasn't a transformation. People didn't suddenly embrace them. But something had cracked. A small opening where there had been none. On the wagon ride home, Eleanor hummed quietly. Lydia was silent, but different than before. Not rigid, just thoughtful. "That wasn't as bad as I expected," she said finally. "It wasn't great either," Ethan replied. "No, but it wasn't terrible. That's something." "Is it enough?" She looked at him. "For today? Yes. Ask me again tomorrow." Life continued. Summer deepened. The ranch demanded constant work, fence repairs, cattle to move, hay to cut and store. Lydia threw herself into everything. She learned to milk the cow, feed the chickens, tend the garden. Eleanor grew stronger, started taking on sewing work for people in town. Word spread that she was skilled, reliable. Slowly, so slowly Ethan almost didn't notice, things changed. Mrs. Brennan ordered a dress from Eleanor, then 2 more. Samuel Pritchard started actually speaking to Lydia when they came for supplies, not just nodding awkwardly. The church grounds committee met, and Lydia's suggestions about the garden were not only heard, but implemented. It wasn't acceptance. Not entirely. But it was less hostility, less open judgment. And through it all, Ethan watched Lydia work. Watched her move through the world with that quiet determination. Watched her care for her mother, manage the house, help with the ranch, never asking for recognition or thanks. Watched her slowly, gradually, let her guard down around him. One evening in late July, they sat on the porch after dinner. Eleanor had gone to bed early. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed impossible. "I never asked you," Lydia said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Why did you really say yes? That first day at the station. You could have sent us away. Should have, probably. Why didn't you?" Ethan was quiet for a long time. Honestly, I don't know. I stood there watching everyone stare at you, watching you help your mother, and I couldn't be one of them, the ones who looked at you and saw only what they expected to see. I wanted to be better than that." "Are you? Better than that?" He looked at her, really looked. At her face in the fading light, the strength in her shoulders, the intelligence in her eyes that people seemed determined to overlook. "I'm trying to be," he said. "That's more than most people do." "Is it enough?" "I don't know yet," she said. "Ask me in a few months." They sat together until the stars came out, and for the first time since she'd arrived, the silence between them felt less like distance and more like peace. August arrived with a vengeance, bringing heat that made the air shimmer above the fields, like water. Ethan woke before dawn most mornings now, trying to get the hardest work done before the sun became unbearable. This particular morning, he found Lydia already in the kitchen, flour dusting her forearms, bread dough rising in bowls covered with damp cloth. "You're up early," he said, pumping water into the basin to wash his face. "Couldn't sleep." She didn't look up from the dough she was kneading. "Too hot." "Could have stayed in bed." "And do what? Lay there sweating? At least this way I'm productive." He dried his face on the towel hanging by the door. The kitchen smelled like yeast and coffee, and somewhere in the background he could hear Eleanor's gentle snoring from her room. The house had developed its own sounds over the past months, creaking boards that sang in specific places, the pump that squeaked on the third stroke, the way the front door scraped against the frame if you didn't lift it slightly while closing. "I'm heading into town today," Ethan said. "Need to pick up supplies, some hardware. Thinking about reinforcing the barn doors before winter." Lydia's hands paused in the dough. "It's August. Winter comes fast out here. You'll see." "I'll come with you." You don't have to. I know I don't have to. She resumed kneading, her movements methodical and strong. Mama needs more thread, and I want to look at fabric. She's been talking about making curtains for your room. My room has curtains. Your room has old sheets nailed above the windows. There's a difference. He couldn't argue with that. They left mid-morning. Eleanor settled in her chair with her sewing and strict instructions to rest. The wagon ride into Ashford took 40 minutes, and for the first 20, neither of them spoke. The landscape rolled past. Dry grass, scattered trees, the occasional farmhouse in the distance. You ever think about leaving? Lydia asked suddenly. Ethan glanced at her. Leaving where? Here. The ranch. This town. All of it. Sometimes. Why? She shrugged, one hand shading her eyes from the sun. I don't know. Seems like the kind of place people leave, not the kind they choose. I chose it. Did you? Or did you just run from something else, and this is where you stopped running? The observation hit closer than he'd expected. Maybe both. That's what I thought. She shifted on the bench, adjusting her skirt. Mama asks me sometimes if I'm happy here. I never know what to tell her. What do you want to tell her? That happiness feels like the wrong question. I'm not unhappy. I'm not scared anymore. I have a roof, food, work that matters. That's more than I had before. But happy? She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. I don't think I remember what that feels like. Ethan let that sit between them for a moment. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not complaining. Just answering honestly. I know. Ashford was busier than usual when they arrived. Saturday market brought people from the surrounding farms, and the main street was crowded with wagons and horses. Ethan found a spot near the general store, helped Lydia down. She still wouldn't take his hand unless the step was particularly high, and they split up with plans to meet back in an hour. The hardware store was dim and smelled like metal and oil. Ethan was examining door hinges when he heard his name. Ethan Calloway. Been a while. He turned to find Thomas Garrett leaning against the counter. Thomas owned the largest ranch in the county, 3 times the size of Ethan's place, and he had the swagger that came with that kind of success. Thomas. Saw your wagon outside. That woman with you, that's the mail-order bride everyone's been talking about? Ethan's jaw tightened. Her name's Lydia. Right, Lydia. Thomas grinned. Heard she's a big girl, real sturdy. Bet she's useful for heavy work. She's not livestock, Thomas. Didn't say she was, just making conversation. He picked at something under his fingernail. You actually planning to marry her? Make it official? I don't see how that's your business. It's not, just curious. Most men in your situation would have sent her back on the first coach out. You've got more charity than sense, I'll give you that. Ethan set down the hinge he'd been holding carefully, very carefully, because if he held it any longer, he might use it as a weapon. You finished? Touchy. Thomas raised his hands in mock surrender. No offense meant. I'm sure she's perfectly adequate for what you need. And what's that? Someone to cook and clean and keep your bed warm, same as any wife. You're just less picky about the packaging than most men. He clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Smart, actually. Pretty fades. Good cooking doesn't. Ethan stepped back, shrugging off the contact. I need to finish my shopping. Sure. Good seeing you, Calloway. Tell your woman I said hello. Outside, Ethan stood on the boardwalk and breathed slowly until his hands unclenched. The anger sat in his chest like a hot coal, and he couldn't quite name who he was angrier at, Thomas for being an ass, or himself for not defending Lydia more forcefully. He found her 20 minutes later outside the fabric store, arms loaded with packages. Let me help. I've got it. Lydia, you can barely see over those. She stopped walking and looked at him. What happened? Nothing. You're clenching your jaw so hard I can see the muscle jumping. What happened? He took some of the packages from her arms despite her protest. Ran into Thomas Garrett. He's an ass, that's all. What did he say? It doesn't matter. Ethan. They were standing in the middle of the boardwalk, people moving around them. Lydia's expression was patient and immovable. He made some comments about you, Ethan said finally. About us. Nothing worth repeating. About how fat I am. He didn't He didn't have to say it directly. I know the words men use when they think they're being clever. She shifted the remaining packages in her arms. What did you say back? Not enough. Something flickered across her face, not hurt exactly, but acknowledgement. It's fine. It's not fine. No, it's not. But it's familiar. I can handle familiar. She started walking again. Come on, we should get back before the bread overrises. The ride home was quiet, but different than the ride there. Heavier. Ethan kept replaying the conversation with Thomas, thinking of all the things he should have said. Better defenses, sharper responses. But they all came too late, uselessly crowding his mind while the wagon wheels turned. Stop it, Lydia said. Stop what? Whatever you're doing in your head, that thing where you're beating yourself up for not being perfect. How do you know that's what I'm doing? Because I do the same thing every day. Every time someone looks at me the wrong way or says something careless, I go over and over it, thinking about what I could have said differently, how I could have made them see me as something other than what they assume. She stared at the horizon. It's exhausting and it doesn't change anything. So what do you do instead? Keep moving, keep working, prove them wrong through actions instead of words. She glanced at him. You've been doing that already. The house? The addition? Bringing us to church? Standing with us instead of hiding us away? That matters more than whatever you said or didn't say to Thomas Garrett. Does it? To me it does. When they got home, Eleanor was on the porch with a woman Ethan didn't recognize. She was younger than Eleanor, maybe 40, with graying hair pulled back severely and a dress that had been mended multiple times. There you are, Eleanor called out. Lydia, this is Mrs. Catherine Monroe. She's here about sewing work. Catherine Monroe stood as they approached, her hands clasped nervously. I'm sorry to intrude. Your mother said you'd be back soon, and I have a proposition, if you'll hear it. Lydia set down her packages. What kind of proposition? I run the boarding house at the edge of town, the old Mitchell place. I have 6 rooms and they're almost always full. Ranch hands, travelers, people passing through, but I can't keep up with the laundry and mending by myself. It's too much. She spoke quickly, as if afraid she'd lose her nerve. I heard your mother does excellent work, and I wondered if you both might be interested in taking on the contract. I can pay. Not a fortune, but fairly. Eleanor and Lydia exchanged glances. How much work are we talking about? Lydia asked. Sheets and towels weekly, mending as needed, maybe 2 or 3 times a month. More during busy season. Catherine twisted her hands together. I know it's a lot, and I understand if you're not interested. I just thought, we're interested, Eleanor said firmly. When do you need an answer? Well, now? If possible. I have 3 rooms checking out tomorrow, and I'm already behind. Then yes, we'll take it. Catherine's face flooded with relief. Really? Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I can bring the first load tomorrow morning if that's acceptable. That's fine. After Catherine left, practically running to her wagon in her eagerness, Eleanor turned to her daughter with a smile. That's good money, Lydia. Steady work. I know, Mama, but it's a lot of labor on top of everything else. We can manage. We always do. That night, Ethan sat at the kitchen table working through the ranch accounts, while Lydia washed dishes and Eleanor prepared thread for the next day's work. The lamp flickered, casting uneven shadows on the walls. You don't have to take the boarding house job, Ethan said without looking up from his ledger. We want to, Lydia replied. I mean, you don't have to for money. The ranch is doing fine. I can... Ethan. She dried her hands on her apron and turned to face him. We appreciate everything you've done. We do. But Mama and I need our own income, our own security. You understand that, don't you? He set down his pen. I'm not going to throw you out. I know you're not. That's not the point. She sat down across from him. The point is that depending entirely on someone else's goodwill is terrifying, even when that person is good. Especially then, actually, because you start to worry about what happens if something changes. Nothing's going to change. You can't promise that. Nobody can. Her voice was gentle but unyielding. This way, Mama and I have something that's ours. Does that make sense? It did, even though he didn't particularly like it. Yeah, it makes sense. Good. She stood, returning to the dishes. Besides, idle hands and all that. We just find more work to do anyway. Eleanor laughed softly from her corner. She's not wrong. We're not built for sitting still. The boarding house work started the next day and quickly became routine. Catherine brought laundry every Monday and Thursday, mountains of it, stained and worn from hard use. Eleanor and Lydia tackled it with systematic efficiency, heating water in huge pots, scrubbing at washboards until their hands were raw, hanging endless lines of sheets and towels to dry in the sun. Ethan helped when he could, hauling the heavy pots, stringing new clotheslines. He found Lydia one afternoon bent over the washboard, her face red with effort and heat, her dress soaked through with water and sweat. "You should rest," he said. "I'm fine." "You've been at this for 4 hours." "Then I'm only halfway done." She didn't look up. "There's coffee in the pot if you want some." He poured 2 cups instead of 1, brought them both outside. Set one beside her. She stared at it for a moment, then smiled slightly. "Thank you." "You're welcome." He sat on the porch steps and watched her work. There was something hypnotic about the rhythm of it. Dunk, scrub, wring, dunk again. Her arms were strong, her movements efficient. She'd rolled her sleeves to her elbows, and he could see the muscle in her forearms flexing with each motion. "You're staring," she said without looking at him. "Sorry." "I didn't say stop. I just said you're staring. I'm not used to people who work as hard as you do." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not used to people who notice." How could anyone not notice? "You'd be surprised what people don't see when they're determined not to." She wrung out a sheet with violent efficiency. "I spent 6 years in that boarding house kitchen, worked 12, 14 hours a day, never called in sick, never showed up late, never complained. You know what the owner said when she fired me? That I was lazy, that I'd been taking advantage of her generosity." "That's insane? Unfair? Welcome to being me." She moved to the next sheet. "People see what they expect to see. If they expect lazy, they find lazy. If they expect incompetent, they find incompetent. Doesn't matter what you actually do." Ethan drank his coffee, searching for the right words. "I don't see you that way." "I know. That's why I'm still here." September brought cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn. The leaves on the cottonwoods started turning, gold bleeding into the green. The work didn't ease. If anything, it intensified as they prepared for winter. Ethan spent long days repairing fences, shoring up the barn, cutting and stacking firewood. Lydia helped with all of it. She learned to handle an axe, split wood with improving accuracy. She helped him repair fence posts, holding them steady while he dug and set them. Her hands developed new calluses on top of old ones. One afternoon, working on a particularly stubborn section of fence near the north pasture, Ethan's shovel hit something solid. He dug around it, expecting rock, and found instead an old metal box, rusted shut, barely bigger than a book. "What is it?" Lydia asked, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I don't know. Wasn't here when I bought the place, or if it was, I never found it." They took it back to the house. Ethan pried it open with a knife, the hinges screaming in protest. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had mostly disintegrated, was a bundle of letters tied with string. "Should we read them?" Lydia asked. "They're not ours. They're not anyone's anymore. Whoever buried them is long gone." He untied the string carefully. The letters were old, the ink faded but still legible. The first one started, "My dearest William, I fear this will be my last letter for some time. The journey west is harder than I imagined, and the company I'm traveling with grows smaller each day." They read through the afternoon, passing letters back and forth. The story emerged in fragments. A woman named Sarah traveling west to meet a man named William, documenting her journey in letters she must have planned to give him all at once. The letters grew darker as they progressed. Sickness. Death in the company. Doubt. The last letter was different, shorter. "William, I cannot do this. I thought I was brave enough, but I'm not. I'm turning back. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Please forget me. You deserve someone stronger." "Boss." "She never made it," Lydia said quietly. "Never gave him these letters. Just buried them and left. Maybe she never went back either. Maybe she got this far and couldn't go forward or back. That's sadder somehow. They reburied the box that evening in the same spot they'd found it. It felt wrong to keep the letters, wrong to expose someone's private grief to the light after all these years. Walking back to the house in the fading light, Lydia said, "Do you think she was right? That she wasn't strong enough?" "I don't know, maybe. Or maybe she was strong enough to admit she couldn't do it. That takes courage too." "Does it? Or is it just cowardice dressed up nice?" "I think there's a difference between knowing your limits and giving up." She was quiet for a long moment. "I used to think I knew my limits. Before I came here, I had this very clear picture of what I could and couldn't do, what I deserved and didn't deserve. Being here has—" She paused. "It scrambled that picture. I don't know what I think anymore. Is that good or bad?" "I don't know that either." October arrived with the first hard frost. The garden died overnight, and Lydia spent a full day harvesting what could be saved, preserving what she could. The kitchen filled with steam from canning pots, the sharp smell of vinegar and spices. Eleanor helped, though her hands tired quickly now that the weather was turning cold. The boarding house work continued. Catherine had become something like a friend, stopping to chat when she dropped off laundry, sometimes bringing small gifts, a jar of honey, fresh eggs, gossip from town. "You hear about the Patterson situation?" she asked one Thursday morning, unloading sheets from her wagon. "What situation?" Lydia asked, helping with the bundles. "The Reverend's wife left him. Just up and left. Took the train east without a word." Lydia stopped mid-motion. "Mrs. Patterson?" "The very same. Nobody knows why. One day she was there, next day gone. He came back from visiting the Hendricks farm and found a note." Catherine lowered her voice conspiratorially. "They say he's taking it hard. Haven't seen him in town in 2 weeks." "That's awful," Eleanor said. "It is. They seemed happy enough, didn't they? But you never know what goes on inside a marriage." After Catherine left, Lydia was quieter than usual. That evening, she asked Ethan, "Do you ever worry that I'll leave? Just wake up one day and decide this was all a mistake?" The question caught him completely off guard. "Do you want to leave?" "I didn't ask that. I asked if you worry about it." He considered lying, saying no, of course not. But they'd moved past easy lies somewhere along the way. "Sometimes. Yeah." "Why?" "Because this whole arrangement is strange, because you could probably do better, because I don't know if I'm giving you enough reason to stay beyond basic survival." She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You think survival isn't enough? Is it?" "For some people, yes. For me—" She trailed off. "I don't know. A year ago, survival would have been everything. Now I'm not sure. I want—" She stopped herself. "What?" "Nothing. It doesn't matter." "Lydia." "I said it doesn't matter." Her voice was sharper than usual. She stood abruptly. "I need to check on Mama." She left him sitting there, the conversation unfinished and hanging like smoke. The next week brought the Church Harvest Festival, an annual tradition where the whole community gathered to celebrate the end of growing season. There would be food, music, games for the children. Ethan had avoided it the previous 2 years, but Eleanor wanted to go, and Lydia agreed. The festival was already in full swing when they arrived. Tables groaned under the weight of contributed dishes. Children ran shrieking between the adults. Someone had brought a fiddle, and music drifted through the cool autumn air. "This is lovely," Eleanor said, her eyes bright. They found a spot to set down the food they'd brought, Lydia's bread, still warm, and a massive pot of stew that had taken most of the previous day to prepare. People noticed, nodded. A few even smiled. "Ethan Calloway, didn't think you'd show," Samuel Pritchard called out, walking over with a plate loaded with food. "Wouldn't miss it," Ethan lied. "Your woman's bread is here, I see. Everyone's been talking about it. Best in the county, they say." Lydia, standing beside Ethan, went very still. "Is that right?" Ethan said carefully. "Oh yes, Mrs. Monroe won't stop going on about it. Says her boarders request it specifically." Samuel took a huge bite to illustrate his point. "You should sell it, Miss Harper. Make some real money." "I have real money," Lydia replied coolly. "From real work." Samuel laughed, missing or ignoring the edge in her tone. I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. He wandered off, and Lydia let out a slow breath. You all right? Ethan asked quietly. Fine. You don't look fine. I look how I always look. People just don't usually bother to check. Before he could respond, Reverend Patterson appeared. He looked terrible, thinner, older, his collar askew and his eyes hollow. Ethan, Miss Harper, Mrs. Harper, his voice was hoarse. Glad you could make it. Reverend, Eleanor said gently, we heard about your wife. We're so sorry. Something crumpled in Patterson's expression, there and gone in a flash. These things happen. The Lord's will. Is there anything we can do? Eleanor asked. No, I'm managing. I just wanted to welcome you, to thank you for being part of this community. He looked at Lydia directly. You've brought good things here, Miss Harper. Don't let anyone tell you different. Then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd before any of them could respond. That poor man, Eleanor murmured. The festival continued around them. At one point, someone called for dancing, and couples began pairing off. Ethan watched Lydia watch them, her expression carefully neutral. You want to dance? He asked before he could think better of it. She looked at him like he'd suggested they strip naked and run through the streets. What? Dance? You want to? Ethan, I can't. People will. Let them. He offered his hand. Come on. I don't know how. Neither do I. We'll figure it out. For a long moment, she just stared at his outstretched hand. Then, slowly, she took it. They moved to the makeshift dance floor, really just a cleared space near the tables. Other couples were already moving, some gracefully, others less so. The fiddle music was fast and cheerful, completely unsuited to the awkward shuffling they managed. I'm terrible at this, Lydia muttered, nearly stepping on his foot. You're doing fine. I'm not. She stumbled slightly, and he caught her. See? Nobody's watching. Everyone's watching. He glanced around. She was right. People were staring, but not all the stares were hostile. Some were curious. Some were even, he thought, approving. Then let's give them something to watch, he said, and spun her clumsily. She laughed, actually laughed, surprised and genuine. You're insane. Probably. They kept dancing, getting slightly better as the song continued. When it ended, they were both breathing hard, grinning like idiots. That wasn't completely terrible, Lydia admitted. High praise. Walking back to where Eleanor sat, they passed Thomas Garrett and his wife. Thomas made eye contact with Ethan, his expression mocking. But before Ethan could react, Lydia squeezed his hand once, quick and firm. Don't, she said quietly. He's not worth it. He's an ass. Yes. But he's an ass whether or not you acknowledge it. The ride home that night was different, lighter somehow. Eleanor dozed in the back of the wagon, wrapped in blankets against the cold. Lydia sat beside Ethan, close enough that their shoulders bumped with the wagon's movement. Thank you, she said after a while. For what? The dancing. I know it wasn't easy. It wasn't hard either. Liar. But she said it fondly. Still, thank you. You're welcome. They rode in silence for a bit, the stars bright and cold overhead. Earlier, Lydia said, when I said I wanted something, I didn't finish. You don't have to. I want to matter, not just be useful or capable or strong. I want to matter to someone, to be seen as more than... She stopped. I don't know how to say it without sounding pathetic. You don't sound pathetic. I feel pathetic. Ethan thought about his response carefully. You matter to me. You have since, I don't know, probably since that first breakfast when you told me the barn was no place for sleeping. She looked at him, her face half-shadowed. Really? Really? Why? Because you're... He struggled for words. You're real. You don't pretend to be something you're not. You work harder than anyone I've ever met, and you don't expect applause for it. You're kind to your mother and patient with me, and sharp with people who deserve it. You make good bread. You dance badly. He stopped. You're you. That matters. Lydia didn't say anything for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was rough. Nobody's ever said anything like that to me before. Then nobody's been paying attention. She wiped at her face quickly, and Ethan pretended not to notice the tears. By the time they reached the ranch, Eleanor was deeply asleep. Ethan carried her inside. She weighed almost nothing, and helped Lydia get her settled in bed. Outside, standing on the porch in the cold night air, Lydia said, "Something's changed between us." "You feel it too, don't you?" "Yeah," Ethan admitted. "I do." "What are we going to do about it?" "I don't know." "That's not very helpful." "I know." He turned to face her. "But I don't want to rush this. I don't want to push you into something because it's convenient or expected. Whatever happens between us, I want it to be real. I want it to be your choice." She studied his face in the darkness. "It is my choice. That's what scares me." "Why?" "Because I've never had a choice before. Not really, and I don't know if I'm making it for the right reasons or if I'm just—" She wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't know what I'm doing, Ethan. I don't know what I want or what I deserve, or if those are even the same thing. They should be the same thing. But they're not. Not for people like me." He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but the words wouldn't come because he knew, on some level, she was right. The world didn't treat her fairly. Didn't give her the same options it gave thinner women, prettier women, women who fit the mold of what was expected and acceptable. "Then we figure it out," he said instead. "Together. No rush, no pressure. Just, honestly, can we do that?" Lydia was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Yeah, we can do that." That night, lying in his room, Ethan stared at the ceiling and thought about choices and chances and the woman sleeping 2 rooms away. Thought about the difference between what he'd expected and what he'd gotten. About how sometimes the best things were the ones you never saw coming. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the new shutters he'd installed. Winter was coming. They'd face it together, whatever that meant. For now, that was enough. The first snow came in late November, 3 weeks earlier than Ethan had predicted. He woke to an unfamiliar brightness filtering through his window and knew immediately what had happened. Outside, the world had gone white and silent, everything softened under 6 inches of fresh powder. In the kitchen, Lydia was already at the stove, coffee brewing. She looked up when he entered, flour dusting her cheek. "It snowed." "I noticed." He poured himself coffee, the cup warming his hands. "You ever seen snow before?" "In the city, but not like this. Not so much of it everywhere." "It'll get worse. This is just the beginning." She turned back to the dough she was kneading. "Then I guess we better be ready." They spent the morning reinforcing everything, checking the animals, making sure the firewood was stacked close to the house, securing shutters. Eleanor watched from the window, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The cold affected her joints badly, made her hands stiff and painful. "Mama's worried about the laundry," Lydia said, stomping snow off her boots as she came back inside around midday. "Says we can't hang it outside in this weather." "String lines in the barn," Ethan suggested. "There's room between the stalls. Won't dry as fast, but it'll dry." "That'll work." She pulled off her gloves, flexing her fingers. They were red and chapped despite the wool. "Catherine's supposed to bring a load tomorrow. I should tell her we might need an extra day." "I can ride into town, let her know." "In this?" Lydia gestured at the window. "You'll freeze." "I've ridden in worse." "That doesn't mean you should." She studied him with that direct gaze she had. "Why do you do that? Act like suffering is some kind of virtue?" "I'm not." "You are. You sleep in the barn for weeks when you don't have to. You work until you're half dead. You ride into snowstorms to deliver messages that could wait." She crossed her arms. "It's like you think you have to earn the right to be comfortable." The observation hit too close. Ethan set down his coffee cup carefully. "Maybe I do." "Why?" "Because comfortable feels like settling, and settling feels like giving up." "On what?" He didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe he did, but it was too tangled up with his father and the seminary and all the ways he'd disappointed people to put into words. Lydia let the silence stretch, then sighed. "I'll write Catherine a note. You can take it tomorrow if the weather clears." But the weather didn't clear. It got worse. By evening, wind was howling around the house, driving snow horizontal across the fields. The temperature dropped until frost formed on the inside of the windows despite the fire. They ate dinner huddled close to the stove, stew that Lydia had made stretch for 3 days, bread so fresh it steamed when you tore it. Eleanor's hand shook too badly to hold her spoon, and Lydia fed her with patient efficiency that made Ethan's chest ache. "Storm like this could last days," he said, watching the windows rattle. "Then we'll manage for days." Lydia finished feeding her mother, wiped her mouth gently. "We've got food, fuel, shelter. We'll be fine." "You're not worried?" "About what?" "Weather?" "Weather doesn't care if you worry about it." She stood, collecting dishes. "Besides, worry doesn't keep you warm." That night, the temperature plummeted further. Ethan woke around midnight to the sound of Eleanor coughing, deep, wet coughs that carried through the thin walls. He lay there listening, debating whether to check, when he heard Lydia's door open. Footsteps. The creak of Eleanor's door. Lydia's voice, low and soothing. More coughing. Ethan got up, pulled on his clothes, and went to the kitchen. Built up the fire, set water to boil. When Lydia emerged 15 minutes later, her face was tight with worry. "She's burning up," Lydia said, without preamble. "Fever. And that cough, it sounds like last time, like the pneumonia." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What does she need?" "Medicine we don't have, a doctor we can't reach in this storm." Lydia's voice was steady, but her hands weren't. "I need to get the fever down. Steam might help the cough." They worked together through the night. Ethan kept the fire going, boiled water for steam, heated rocks wrapped in cloth to keep Eleanor warm. Lydia stayed with her mother, bathing her face with cool water, coaxing her to drink, holding her when the coughing got too violent. By dawn, Eleanor was still feverish, but the cough had eased slightly. Lydia looked like she'd been through a war, hair tangled, dress wrinkled, dark circles under her eyes. "You should rest," Ethan said. "Can't. Catherine's laundry is coming today." "Lydia, your mother will be fine for a few hours. She's sleeping now, and we need the money." She stood, wavering slightly. "I'll make breakfast first. Sit down." "Ethan, sit. Down." He pointed at the chair. "I'll make breakfast. You rest for 10 minutes before you fall over." For once, she didn't argue, just sank into the chair and put her head in her hands. Ethan made eggs and coffee, nothing fancy, but hot and filling. He put a plate in front of her and she ate mechanically, not really tasting it. "She was doing so well," Lydia said after a while. "I thought we were past this, past the sickness." "She'll get through it again." "You don't know that." "No," he admitted. "I don't. But she's tougher than she looks. And she's got you. That counts for something." Lydia looked at him, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "What if it's not enough?" "Then we deal with it. Together." The word hung there. Together. It meant something different now than it had months ago. Heavier, more permanent. Catherine didn't come that day. The storm kept everyone inside. But by the next afternoon, the wind had died and pale sunlight broke through the clouds. Ethan saddled his horse and rode to town, breaking trail through snow that came up to the horse's knees. Town was quiet, most people still digging out. He found Catherine at the boarding house, supervising repairs to a shutter that had torn loose in the wind. "Ethan Calloway, I was worried about you all." She climbed down from the ladder. "How's Eleanor?" Lydia said she was feeling poorly before the storm. "Worse now, fever and cough. Lydia thinks it might be pneumonia again." Catherine's expression shifted. "That's bad, real bad. Old Doc Morrison died last month. Did you hear?" Ethan's heart sank. "No." His son took over the practice, but he's not much of a doctor. More interested in drinking than healing, if you ask me. She wiped her hands on her apron. "But he's all we've got. You want me to send him out?" "Would he come?" "For money, he'll go anywhere." Ethan paid Catherine to arrange it, then bought supplies at the general store, willow bark for fever, honey for the cough, extra blankets. Samuel Pritchard gave him a look when he saw the items. "Eleanor Harper's sick?" "Yes." "That's a shame. She's a good woman, does fine work." He wrapped the willow bark carefully. "Tell Lydia if she needs anything, we can extend credit." It was a small kindness, but genuine. Ethan nodded his thanks. The young Doc Morrison arrived 2 days later, riding a horse that looked as tired as he did. He was maybe 30, with bloodshot eyes and hands that trembled slightly. Not from cold. He examined Eleanor with perfunctory efficiency, listened to her chest, checked her pulse. Pneumonia, he confirmed. Bad case. She needs rest, warmth, and this. He handed Lydia a small bottle. Tonic, 2 spoons a day. Might help, might not. That's it? Lydia's voice was sharp. That's all you can do? Morrison shrugged. Medicine's not magic, Miss Harper. Sometimes people get better, sometimes they don't. Keep her comfortable. That's the best anyone can do. Your father would have done more. My father's dead. Morrison stood, collecting his bag. That'll be $5. Ethan paid him, watched him ride away with something cold and angry in his gut. He's useless, Lydia said flatly. Worse than useless. The tonic might help. It's probably just whiskey and sugar water. But she gave it to Eleanor anyway, because what else was there to do? The next week was brutal. Eleanor's fever spiked and fell unpredictably. Sometimes she was lucid, talking with them, sewing even when her hands could barely hold the needle. Other times she was delirious, calling for people long dead, reliving memories from decades past. Lydia barely slept. Ethan would find her at all hours, sitting beside her mother's bed, holding her hand, speaking softly. The laundry piled up. The house fell into disarray. None of it mattered. One night, around 3 a.m, Ethan woke to silence, complete silence. No coughing, no movement. His heart stopped. He threw on clothes and went to Eleanor's room. Found Lydia sitting on the floor beside the bed, her mother's hand in hers, both of them still. Lydia? She looked up. Her face was wet with tears, but her voice was steady. She's sleeping. Really sleeping, for the first time in days. The fever broke an hour ago. Relief hit him so hard he had to grab the doorframe. She's okay? She's better. Not okay yet, but better. Lydia looked back at her mother. I thought, when I woke up and she was so still, I thought, I know. I don't know what I'd do if... Her voice cracked. Ethan crossed the room, knelt beside her on the floor, put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him just slightly, and they stayed like that while Eleanor slept on, oblivious to how close she'd come. Eleanor's recovery was slow. It took 2 weeks before she could sit up without help. Another week before she could walk across the room without getting winded. But she recovered. Against Morrison's pessimistic predictions, against the odds, she pulled through. Lydia threw herself back into work with manic intensity, as if making up for lost time. The laundry got done. The house got cleaned. The cooking resumed its usual excellence. But something had changed. There was a brittle quality to her now, a tension that hadn't been there before. Ethan watched her push herself harder and harder, and finally, one evening, after she'd been working for 16 hours straight, he stopped her. Enough. She looked up from the bread she was kneading. I'm not done. Yes, you are. For today, you're done. Ethan, I have to... You don't have to do anything except stop. He took the dough away from her, set it aside. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? I sleep enough. You don't. You're exhausted. You're going to make yourself sick. I'm fine. You're not fine. You haven't been fine since your mother got sick. Lydia's jaw tightened. She's better now. But you're not. I said I'm fine. Lydia, what do you want me to say? Her voice rose suddenly. That I'm scared? That I spent 2 weeks thinking I was going to lose the only family I have left? That I can't stop working because if I stop, I'll have to think about it? She was breathing hard. Is that what you want to hear? I want you to be honest. I am being honest. I'm terrified. All the time. Of her dying, of us being a burden, of you deciding this isn't worth it anymore. Of... She stopped herself. Of what? Nothing. Lydia. Of caring too much. The words came out raw. Of letting myself believe this is real and permanent, and then losing it, losing you. The admission hung in the air between them. Ethan took a breath. You're not going to lose me. You can't promise that. No, I can't. But I can tell you that I don't want to go anywhere. That having you and Eleanor here has made this place feel like more than just a house I built. It feels like home. He stepped closer. And I can tell you that I've been trying not to push, trying to give you space, but I'm tired of pretending I don't feel what I feel. Which is what? He met her eyes. That I want this to be real. Not just an arrangement, not just practical. Real. Lydia stared at him. Ethan, I can't be what you probably imagined when you sent for a wife. I'm not delicate or refined, or I don't want delicate or refined. I want you, exactly as you are. Why? Because you're strong when I'm weak. Because you care about people even when they don't deserve it. Because you make good bread and terrible jokes, and you're honest even when it hurts. He reached for her hand. Because somewhere between that first morning and now, I fell in love with you. She pulled her hand back like he'd burned her. Don't. Don't what? Don't say that unless you mean it. Don't say it because you feel sorry for me or because it's expected or, I mean it. He said it firmly. I love you. I probably have for months. I just didn't know how to say it. Lydia's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Be loved. Be wanted for something other than what I can do. She wiped at her face angrily. All my life I've been useful, strong, capable, never pretty, never delicate, never the one anyone chose because they wanted to. And now you're standing here saying, she couldn't finish. I'm saying I choose you. Not because I need you to cook or clean or work. Not because you're useful, because you matter to me, because I want to build a life with you, not just share a house. But what if I'm not enough? Enough for what? For you, for this, for a real marriage instead of just an arrangement. Ethan took both her hands this time, held them firmly when she tried to pull away. You are enough. You've always been enough. The problem was never you, Lydia. It was everyone else being too stupid or blind to see it. She was crying openly now, and he pulled her into his arms. She resisted for a moment, then collapsed against him, shaking with sobs that had probably been building for months. He held her while she cried, one hand smoothing her hair, and thought about all the ways the world had failed her, all the people who'd looked at her and seen only her body, never her heart or mind, or the strength that ran deeper than muscle. I'm sorry, she said eventually, her voice muffled against his chest. For what? For falling apart. You're allowed to fall apart sometimes. I don't like it. I know. He eased back slightly so he could see her face. But you don't have to hold everything together all the time. That's what I'm here for. She looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen. Is this real? You and me? As real as you want it to be. She took a shaky breath. I want to believe it's possible, that we could be more than just practical. Then believe it. It's not that simple. Why not? Because believing means risking. And I've spent so long protecting myself that I don't know how to stop. Ethan understood that. Had spent years doing his own version of the same thing, running from his father, from expectations, from anything that might require him to be vulnerable. We could try together, he suggested. Figure it out as we go. What if we fail? What if we don't? She almost smiled at that. You're terrible at risk assessment. Probably, but I'm good at other things. Like what? Building things, fixing fences, making you laugh occasionally. You don't make me laugh. You're smiling right now. She was, just barely, but it was there. They stood like that for a long moment, and then Lydia said very quietly, I think I love you too. I'm not sure because I've never felt it before, so I don't know what it's supposed to feel like. But when I think about leaving, about going somewhere else, I can't breathe. And when I think about staying, about this being permanent, I'm scared, but also... She paused. Also hopeful. Is that love? I think it might be. Then, yes, I love you, probably. Maybe. I don't know. She pressed her face back against his chest. This is terrifying. Yeah, he agreed. It is. From the other room, Eleanor's voice called out, weak but clear. Lydia? Is everything all right? Lydia pulled back, wiping her face. I should... Go. I'll finish the bread. She looked at him, something new and fragile in her expression. Then she went to her mother. Ethan stood alone in the kitchen, his heart doing strange things in his chest, and thought about choices. About the woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach and shattered every expectation he'd had. About how sometimes the best things in life were the ones you never planned for. The next morning, over breakfast, he made a different kind of choice. "I think we should get married," he said. Eleanor choked on her coffee. Lydia's fork clattered to her plate. "What?" Lydia managed. "Married. Properly. Not just an arrangement. A real marriage." "Ethan, I know this isn't romantic. I know I should probably do this with flowers or some kind of speech, but I'm not good at that. I'm better at being direct." He looked at her steadily. "I love you. I want to marry you. Not because it's expected or convenient, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore. So, will you?" Lydia stared at him. Eleanor made a small sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "This is insane," Lydia said. "Is that a no?" "It's..." She put her hands over her face. "It's not a no. It's just, why now?" "Because last night I realized I've been waiting for the right moment, and there's never going to be a perfect time. There's just now. This. Us." He reached across the table, gently pulled her hands away from her face. "You don't have to answer right now. Think about it. But I wanted you to know, I'm not asking because I need a wife or a housekeeper. I'm asking because I want you. As my partner. As my equal. As my wife." Eleanor spoke up, her voice still rough from being sick. "Say yes, Lydia." "Mama?" "Say yes. This man loves you, really loves you. I can see it." Eleanor's eyes were bright. "And you love him. Don't let fear steal this from you." Lydia looked between them, and Ethan could see the war happening behind her eyes. Fear and hope, doubt and longing all tangled up together. "Okay," she said finally. "Yes, but what? But you have to promise me something. Anything. If you change your mind, if you wake up one day and realize this was a mistake, you tell me. You don't stay out of obligation or pity. You tell me the truth." It hurt that she even had to ask, that she'd been treated so badly for so long that she couldn't believe someone might actually want her permanently. "I promise," he said, "but I'm not going to change my mind." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." She studied his face like she was memorizing it. Then she nodded once. "Okay, yes, let's get married." Eleanor clapped her hands together, delighted. Ethan felt something release in his chest, relief and joy and terror all mixed together. They were doing this. They were really doing this. The wedding was set for December 20th, 2 weeks away. It gave Eleanor time to make a dress. She insisted, despite her hands still being weak. Gave Ethan time to spread the word in town, to make arrangements with Reverend Patterson, to try and fail to stop second-guessing himself. Lydia went quiet. Not cold or distant, just thoughtful. She worked on the laundry, helped Eleanor with the dress, cooked meals. But there was something happening behind her eyes that Ethan couldn't quite read. 1 week before the wedding, he found her sitting on the porch, despite the cold, staring out at the snow-covered fields. "You all right?" he asked. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how strange life is. 6 months ago, I was in a cramped boarding house room, taking care of Mama, wondering how we'd eat next week. Now I'm here. About to marry a man She paused. "A man I never expected to exist." "Having second thoughts?" "No, not second thoughts, just regular thoughts. Processing." She pulled her shawl tighter. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified." She laughed softly. "Good. I'd worry if you weren't." "Why?" "Because it would mean you hadn't really thought about what you're doing, that you're marrying someone like me." "Someone like you?" "Fat, poor, nothing special." Ethan sat down beside her. "You want to know what I think when I look at you?" "Probably not." "I think you're the strongest person I've ever met. I think you've survived things that would have broken most people. I think you're beautiful, even though I know you don't believe that. And I think I'm lucky, genuinely lucky that you stepped off that stagecoach." Lydia's throat worked. "You're going to make me cry again." "Sorry." "Don't be." She leaned against him just slightly. "Thank you for seeing me, for wanting me, for..." She gestured vaguely. "All of it." "You're welcome." They sat together as the sun set, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. Inside, Eleanor was humming while she sewed. The horses shuffled in the barn. The world kept turning. And in 1 week, everything would change again. The morning of the wedding, Ethan woke to find ice crystals forming patterns on the inside of his window. Beautiful and cold, and completely indifferent to the fact that his life was about to change permanently. His stomach felt like he'd swallowed rocks. He dressed carefully in the suit he'd bought in town, new, stiff, uncomfortable around the collar. His hands fumbled with the buttons. When he looked in the cracked mirror above his wash basin, he barely recognized himself. In the kitchen, Eleanor was already up, despite the early hour, putting finishing touches on the dress spread across the table. She looked up when he entered, her eyes soft. "You look handsome," she said. "I look terrified." "That too." She smiled. "But mostly handsome." "Where's Lydia?" "Still sleeping. I told her to rest as long as she could. It's going to be a long day." Ethan poured coffee with shaking hands. Does she seem scared?" "Yes." "Happy?" "Also yes." "Confused about being both at once?" "Absolutely." Eleanor threaded her needle with careful precision. "She loves you, Ethan. She's just never been allowed to believe that love could be for her. Give her time." "We're getting married in 4 hours. I didn't say give her years, just patience." She nodded the thread. "And you? Any regrets?" "No, just nerves." "Good nerves or bad nerves?" "I don't know if there's a difference." Eleanor laughed quietly. "There is. Good nerves mean you care about getting it right. Bad nerves mean you're doing the wrong thing. Which are yours?" Ethan thought about it. About Lydia sitting beside him in the wagon, working beside him in the fields, crying against his chest. About the way she made him laugh and called him out when he was being stubborn and never asked for anything she didn't desperately need. "Good nerves," he said. "Then you'll be fine." The church was small and drafty, decorated with pine boughs that Catherine Monroe had insisted on bringing. She'd also brought half the town, apparently, because when Ethan arrived an hour early, people were already gathering. More people than he'd expected. More than he'd invited, actually. Samuel Pritchard was there with his wife and 3 children. The Hendricks family. The Garretts. Thomas gave Ethan a nod that might have been respectful or might have been mocking, hard to tell. Mrs. Brennan sat in the front row, fan already moving despite the cold. Reverend Patterson met Ethan at the door, looking better than he had at the Harvest Festival, but still worn around the edges. "Big day," Patterson said. "Yeah." "You ready?" "No idea." Patterson smiled slightly. "That's honest, at least. Come on, let's get you positioned before you bolt." Ethan stood at the front of the church, hands clasped to keep them from shaking, and watched people file in. Watched them whisper to each other. Watched their expressions shift between curiosity and judgment and something that might have been approval. Then the door opened again, and everything else fell away. Lydia stood in the doorway, Eleanor beside her for support. The dress Eleanor had made was simple, no lace or elaborate trim, but it fit Lydia perfectly, hugging her broad shoulders and strong frame. Her hair was pulled back, a few loose curls framing her face. She looked terrified and beautiful, and so vulnerable it hurt to look at her. Their eyes met across the church. She didn't smile, but something in her expression softened. Eleanor walked her down the aisle slowly. When they reached the front, Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand once, then took her seat. Lydia stood beside Ethan, close enough that he could hear her breathing, fast and shallow. "You okay?" he whispered. "Ask me later." Patterson began the ceremony. The words washed over Ethan in a blur. Love and honor, sickness and health, all the promises people made when they thought they knew what forever meant. He tried to focus, to be present, but his mind kept skipping ahead and backward, never quite settling. Then Patterson said, "The vows." And suddenly Ethan was very, very present. He turned to face Lydia fully. Her hands were cold when he took them. "I'm not good at speeches," he started, and someone in the congregation laughed softly. "But I need you to know, this isn't convenient for me. This isn't practical or sensible or any of the things people probably think it is. This is me choosing you, because I can't imagine not choosing you. Because you make everything better and harder and more real than it's ever been. I promise to see you really see you every day, to choose you every day, to build something with you that's ours and nobody else's. That's. He stopped, swallowed hard. That's all I've got. Lydia's eyes were bright with tears. She took a breath. I don't know how to be married, she said, her voice stronger than he'd expected. I don't know how to be loved or wanted or any of the things this is supposed to be. But I know how to work, how to show up, how to be honest even when it's uncomfortable. She tightened her grip on his hands. So I promise to keep showing up, to keep being honest, to try to believe that this is real and I deserve it even when my brain tells me otherwise. And I promise to love you the best way I know how, which might not be perfect, but it'll be real. That's all I can give you. That's enough, Ethan said. That's more than enough. Patterson cleared his throat. Right, well, the rings? They didn't have rings. Hadn't even thought about rings. Ethan felt his face heat with embarrassment, but Eleanor stood up from her seat. I have something, she said. She walked forward holding 2 simple gold bands. These were mine and my husband's. He's been gone 2 years now, and I think he'd want Lydia to have them, both of them. Lydia made a sound like a sob. Mama, take them. Build something new with them. Eleanor pressed the rings into Ethan's hand. Make them mean something again. The rings were worn smooth, warm from Eleanor's pocket. Ethan slipped the smaller one onto Lydia's finger. It fit perfectly. She took the other with shaking hands and did the same for him. Patterson pronounced them married. Ethan kissed his wife. Brief, awkward, their noses bumping slightly, and the church erupted in applause. Not everyone clapped. Some people just watched, expressions neutral. But enough people were genuinely happy that it felt real. They were married. Actually married. The reception was held at the church hall, tables loaded with food people had brought. Someone had even made a cake, lopsided and oversweet, but a cake nonetheless. Ethan stood beside Lydia, accepting congratulations from people who'd barely spoken to them months ago, and tried to process what had just happened. Mrs. Calloway, Catherine Monroe said, hugging Lydia tightly. Oh, I'm so happy for you both. Thank you, Lydia managed, still looking dazed. And Eleanor, that dress is exquisite. You could sell work like that in the city. I'm serious. Eleanor beamed. Thomas Garrett approached with his wife, a thin woman who always looked vaguely disapproving. Thomas extended his hand to Ethan. Congratulations. Ethan shook it warily. Thanks. I mean it. You're a braver man than most. Before Ethan could respond, Thomas turned to Lydia. Mrs. Calloway, your bread is legendary. If you ever consider selling commercially, I'd invest. Lydia blinked. Thank you? Just business sense. Good products deserve recognition. He tipped his hat and moved on. Did that just happen? Lydia asked. I think so. I don't know if he was being genuine or condescending. With Thomas, it's probably both. The reception continued around them. Music started. Someone had brought a fiddle again. People danced. Children ran wild. Eleanor held court near the cake, surrounded by women asking about her sewing. Ethan and Lydia ended up on the edge of it all, watching. You want to dance? He asked. We're terrible at dancing. I know, but we're married now. We can be terrible together officially. She almost smiled. That's a terrible argument. It's the best I've got. They danced badly, just like at the Harvest Festival, but nobody seemed to care. Lydia relaxed incrementally, her body less rigid against his. By the third song, she was actually smiling. What? Ethan asked. Nothing, just, this is surreal. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up. If you do, wake me up too. I want to see what happens next. You're ridiculous. I'm your husband. I'm allowed to be ridiculous. She laughed at that. Actually laughed. And Ethan felt something settle in his chest. They left the reception as the sun was setting, Eleanor insisting she'd be fine staying with Catherine for the night. The wagon ride home was quiet. Lydia sat close to him, their shoulders touching. You nervous? She asked as the house came into view. About what? Tonight. The wedding night. All of that. Ethan had been trying very hard not to think about that. A little. You? Terrified. We don't have to, I mean, there's no rush. We can just sleep in separate rooms on our wedding night? That seems. She paused. I don't know what that seems like, but it seems wrong somehow. So what do you want to do? I don't know. I've never, I mean, I haven't. She stopped, frustrated. I don't know what I'm doing. Neither do I. You haven't either? No. He felt his face heat. I thought seminary and all that. I was supposed to be, it seemed important at the time, and then after there just wasn't, it never. He stopped, realizing he was rambling. No, I haven't. Lydia absorbed this. So we're both clueless. Completely. That's either the worst thing or the best thing. We'll find out which. Inside the house felt strange without Eleanor. Too quiet, too empty. Lydia moved through the kitchen lighting lamps, and Ethan built up the fire. Domestic tasks they'd done 100 times, but everything felt different now. I should change, Lydia said finally. The dress? Mama worked so hard on it. I don't want to damage it. Right, yeah, I'll just. He gestured vaguely at his room. They separated. Ethan changed out of the suit into regular clothes, then stood awkwardly in his room wondering what the protocol was. Did he wait? Go to her? They hadn't discussed logistics. A soft knock on his door. Ethan? He opened it. Lydia stood there in her nightdress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked young and scared and determined all at once. Can I come in? Of course. She entered, looking around like she'd never seen his room before. Sat on the edge of his bed, hands clasped in her lap. I'm going to say something, and I need you to listen without interrupting. Okay. She took a breath. I'm scared. Not of you, but of this. Of being vulnerable. Of you seeing me, really seeing me, and deciding it's too much. My body's not, it's not what men want. I know that. I've known that my whole life. And the idea of you looking at me and being disappointed or disgusted or just. Her voice cracked. I'm terrified. Ethan sat beside her. Can I say something now? I guess. I'm scared too. I'm scared of doing this wrong, of hurting you, of not being what you need. But the one thing I'm not scared of is being disappointed by you. He took her hand. I know what you look like, Lydia. I see you every day. And every day I think you're beautiful. Every day I feel lucky. That's not going to change because, he gestured vaguely, because of anything. You don't know that. I do, actually, because I already know the worst things about you. She looked offended. Like what? You're stubborn. You don't ask for help even when you need it. You make terrible jokes. You snore. I do not snore. You absolutely do. Your mother told me. He squeezed her hand. And I know all that, and I still married you. So I think we're past the point where I'm going to suddenly change my mind. Lydia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I don't know what I'm doing. Me neither. So we figure it out together, and if it's awkward or weird or bad, we try again. We've got time. That's simple? That's simple. It wasn't simple. It was awkward and uncertain, and there were moments when they both laughed from sheer nervousness. But there were also moments of connection, of genuine tenderness, of two people learning each other in the most fundamental way possible. Afterward, lying at the darkness, Lydia said, That was awkward? I was going to say not terrible. High praise, like. She elbowed him lightly. I mean it, though. It wasn't what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Something clinical, transactional, like everything else has been. She shifted closer. But it wasn't that. No, Ethan agreed. It wasn't. They fell asleep tangled together, and when Ethan woke in the early morning light, Lydia was still there, her breathing deep and even. He watched her sleep for a while, marveling at the strangeness of it all. 6 months ago, he'd been alone. Now he had a wife, a life, something worth protecting. Eleanor came home the next day, full of gossip from town about the wedding. Everyone's talking about it, she announced, settling into her chair. Apparently it was lovely. Catherine says you both looked happy. We were happy, Lydia said, kneading bread with more force than necessary. And now? Still happy? Lydia glanced at Ethan, something soft in her expression. Yeah, still happy. Winter deepened. The work continued. Animals to feed, snow to clear, laundry to wash. But everything felt different now, permanent, real in a way it hadn't been before. Ethan found himself noticing small things, the way Lydia hummed while she worked, how she always checked on her mother first thing every morning, the small smiles she got when she successfully completed a difficult task. She noticed things about him too. You grind your teeth when you're worried, she said one evening. I do not. You do. And you get this line between your eyebrows. She pressed her finger there gently. What are you worried about? Money, the ranch, whether we'll have enough hay to last until spring. We will. You don't know that. No, but worrying won't create more hay. It'll just give you a headache. She kissed his forehead. Come to bed. Tomorrow's problems can wait until tomorrow. It was domestic and ordinary, and more than he'd ever thought he'd have. In January, the boarding house work picked up. More travelers, more laundry. Lydia and Eleanor worked themselves ragged trying to keep up. Ethan helped when he could, but the ranch demanded attention too. A section of fence collapsed under heavy snow, 2 cows got sick, the roof developed a leak. One particularly brutal week, when everything seemed to be falling apart at once, Ethan came in to find Lydia crying at the kitchen table. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. She wiped at her face angrily. I'm just tired. What can I do? There's nothing to do. There's too much. The laundry, the cooking, Mama's hands are bad again, so she can't help as much. The roof is leaking into my room. I can't. She stopped. I can't do it all. Then don't. What? Don't do it all. We'll figure something out. Cut back on the laundry work. Let me hire someone to help with the roof. Something. We need the money from the laundry. We need you not to collapse more. What good is money if you're too exhausted to enjoy any of it? She looked at him like he'd spoken another language. That's not how life works. Then maybe we make it work different. He sat beside her. We're partners now. That means you don't have to carry everything alone. Let me help. You already help. Not enough, apparently. He took her hand. Talk to Catherine. Tell her we need to reduce the load. If she can't do that, we walk away. We can't just... We can. And we will if we have to. He meant it. You're more important than laundry money. Lydia stared at him. Then she started crying again, but different this time. Relief, maybe. Or just the release of pressure she'd been holding too long. Ethan held her while she cried and thought about strength, about how the strongest people were the ones who'd learned to carry too much, and how sometimes love meant teaching them they didn't have to. Catherine, to her credit, understood immediately when Lydia talked to her. Of course. I've been pushing too hard, haven't I? I'll cut it back by 1/3. Keep the same rate. She patted Lydia's hand. You're valuable to me. I don't want to lose you over laundry. February brought a thaw, then more snow, then finally the first hints of spring. The days grew incrementally longer. The ice on the water trough melted during the day, though it refroze at night. And Lydia started feeling sick. At first she dismissed it, just tired, working too hard, not eating enough. But when the nausea persisted into the 3rd week, Eleanor took one look at her daughter and smiled knowingly. You're pregnant. Lydia bent over a bucket in case she needed to vomit again, looked up. What? Pregnant. With child. Expecting. Eleanor couldn't stop smiling. Oh, Lydia, I can't be pregnant. Why not? You're married. These things happen. But we've only been married 2 months. That's plenty of time. Eleanor helped her daughter sit. How do you feel about it? I don't know. Scared, overwhelmed, like maybe I ate something bad and this is all a false alarm. It's not a false alarm. How do you know? Because I've been pregnant. I recognize the signs, and because... Eleanor gestured at Lydia's middle. You're showing already. Just a little, but I can tell. Lydia looked down at herself, pressed her hands against her stomach. There's nothing there. Not yet, but there will be. When Ethan came in from the fields that evening, both women were waiting for him. He knew immediately something had changed by the way they looked at him. What happened? Sit down, Lydia said. He sat. I'm pregnant. The words didn't process at first, just sounds without meaning. Then they hit him all at once. There's a baby, yes? Lydia watched him carefully. How do you feel about that? Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't know. Happy? Terrified? Both? That's fair. When? Late summer, we think. August or September? August. 6 months away. 6 months to prepare for something he'd never imagined, never planned for. Are you okay with this? Lydia asked, and there was something vulnerable in her voice. I know we didn't plan it. If you're not ready, I'm ready. I think. Maybe. I don't know. He crossed to her, took her hands. But I want this. With you. A family. Even though I'm going to get bigger? Even though I'll be even less attractive than I already am? You're not... He stopped himself. They'd had this argument before. You're beautiful. You're going to be more beautiful. And I'm going to be terrified the entire time that I'll do something wrong. But we'll figure it out, right? Right. She didn't sound convinced. The pregnancy was hard. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Exhaustion so profound that some afternoons Lydia couldn't get out of bed. Her body changed rapidly, her already generous frame expanding to accommodate new life, and Ethan watched her struggle with it. I look like a barn, she said one evening, standing in front of the mirror. You look pregnant. Same thing. It's not. He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her as much as her belly would allow. You're growing our child. That's amazing. I'm huge. You're beautiful. You're obligated to say that. I mean it. He turned her to face him. I know you don't believe me. I know you look at yourself and see all the things you've been taught to hate. But I look at you and see strength, see life, see my wife carrying my child, and that's beautiful. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. She cried. Again. She cried a lot these days, emotions running wild with the pregnancy. Work became complicated. Lydia couldn't do the heavy lifting anymore. Eleanor tried to take up the slack, but her hands weren't reliable. Ethan hired a boy from town, Daniel, 16 and eager, to help with the ranch work and some of the heavier household tasks. I hate this, Lydia said, watching Daniel haul water she used to carry herself. Hate what? Being useless. You're not useless. You're pregnant. There's a difference. It doesn't feel different. May arrived with wildflowers and warming temperatures. Lydia's belly grew impossible to ignore. She moved differently now, one hand always supporting her lower back. Simple tasks exhausted her, but she also, despite her complaints, seemed to soften somehow. Ethan would catch her with her hands on her belly, feeling the baby move, and something wondering would cross her face. It kicked, she told him one night. The baby? No, the cow. Yes, the baby. She grabbed his hand, pressed it against her stomach. Wait, feel that? He did. A small flutter against his palm, then a harder push. He couldn't find words. I know. Lydia's face was awestruck. There's a whole person in there, a whole person we made. Yeah. They sat like that for a long time, his hand on her belly, feeling their child move. In June, Dr. Morrison came out to check on Lydia. He looked better than he had in the winter, more sober, more focused. He examined her with something approaching actual medical care. Everything looks good, he said. Baby's healthy, heartbeat's strong. You're doing well. When? Lydia asked. Hard to say exactly. Late August, maybe early September. Could be earlier. First babies are unpredictable. He packed his bag. You need to rest more. I know that's hard, but you're carrying a lot of weight. Your body needs breaks. After he left, Lydia said, I'm scared. Of what? The birth. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't do it? You can do it. You're the strongest person I know. Strength doesn't matter. Women die in childbirth all the time. Strong women, healthy women. Ethan's blood went cold. He hadn't let himself think about that possibility. You're not going to die. You don't know that. No, I don't. But I know you. And I know you don't give up. Ever. He pulled her close. We're going to get through this. All three of us. She clung to him, and he could feel her shaking. July was brutal. Heat and humidity and Lydia's temper fraying under the strain of carrying another human inside her body. She snapped at everyone. Ethan, Eleanor, even Daniel. Then she cried about snapping. Then she snapped again. I'm sorry, she said one evening after yelling at him for leaving his boots in the wrong place. I don't know what's wrong with me. You're growing a human. That seems like a valid excuse. I'm being awful. You're being pregnant. He kissed her forehead. It's fine. It's not fine. She stopped, her hand going to her belly. Oh, what? What's wrong? Nothing, just big kick, really big. She breathed slowly. It's getting close, I think. The baby, I can feel it. How can you tell? I don't know, I just can. Mother's instinct or something. She looked at him, fear naked in her expression. I'm not ready. Nobody's ready. What if I'm terrible at this? At being a mother? You won't be. How do you know? Because I've watched you care for your mother, care for me, care for every living thing on this ranch. You know how to love. That's what matters. She wanted to believe him. He could see it, but the fear won out. The baby came on August 15th, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Lydia woke Ethan before dawn, her face pale. Something's happening. He was up immediately. The baby? I think so. The pains, they're different, stronger. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, already dressed. How far apart? Maybe 10 minutes? I don't know. I'm not sure when they started. We need to get the midwife. Now. Ethan rode to town faster than he'd ever ridden, brought back Mrs. Henderson, the midwife, in record time. She took one look at Lydia and started issuing orders. Boil water, clean linens, then get out. I want to stay, Ethan said. No, you don't. Trust me. This isn't for husbands. Eleanor touched his arm. Go. We'll call you when it's over. He paced the porch for hours. Heard Lydia scream once, a sound that turned his blood to ice. Then silence. Then low voices he couldn't make out. Daniel showed up mid-morning to help with the chores. Is Mrs. Calloway still in there? I'm sure she'll be fine. You don't know that. No, sir. But she's tough. Everyone says so. Midday passed. Then afternoon. Ethan was half out of his mind when the door finally opened. Mrs. Henderson emerged, looking exhausted but satisfied. You have a daughter, healthy, good lungs. And Lydia? Tired. Lost some blood, but not dangerously. She'll be fine. Relief hit him so hard he had to grab the porch railing. Can I see her? Give Eleanor a few minutes to get her cleaned up. Then, yes. When he finally entered the bedroom, Lydia was propped up against pillows, hair matted with sweat, face exhausted. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. Hey, she said softly. Hey, yourself. He crossed to the bed, sat carefully. You okay? I've been better, but I'm alive. She looked down at the baby. We have a daughter. Can I? Of course. She passed him the bundle, and Ethan looked down at his daughter for the first time. Tiny red face, eyes scrunched shut, a shock of dark hair. She was perfect, absolutely perfect. She's beautiful, he whispered. She looks like a wrinkled potato. A beautiful wrinkled potato. Lydia laughed weakly. We need to name her. They'd discussed names but never settled on anything. Now, looking at this tiny human they'd created, Ethan said, What about Rose? After your grandmother? Lydia's eyes filled with tears. You remembered. Of course I remembered. Rose. She tested the name. Rose Calloway. I like that. Rose started crying, a surprisingly loud sound for something so small, and Lydia took her back, began nursing with Eleanor's quiet guidance. Ethan watched his wife and daughter together, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. He had a family, an actual family, people who depended on him, who he'd protect with everything he had. It was terrifying. It was perfect. Rose didn't sleep through the night for the first 3 months. Ethan learned to function on broken sleep, stumbling through days in a fog while Lydia nursed and changed and soothed their daughter through endless crying fits. Eleanor helped when she could, but her strength wasn't what it used to be, and they all knew it even if nobody said it out loud. "I don't know what I'm doing wrong," Lydia said one particularly brutal night around 2 in the morning, Rose screaming in her arms despite everything they'd tried. "I fed her, changed her, checked for rashes, walked with her for an hour. Nothing works." Ethan took the baby, gave Lydia a break. Rose's face was red and scrunched, tears streaming down her cheeks. He bounced her gently, hummed a tune he barely remembered from his own childhood. "Maybe she just needs to cry," he suggested. "Babies don't just need to cry. Something's wrong. Or maybe sometimes babies cry and nothing's wrong. Maybe that's just what they do." Lydia looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." "Probably, but I'm too tired to come up with anything smarter." Rose's crying tapered off gradually, then stopped. She looked up at Ethan with wide, unfocused eyes, hiccuped once, and fell asleep against his shoulder. "How did you—" Lydia stared. "I've been trying for 2 hours. Lucky, I guess." He transferred the sleeping baby carefully to her cradle, or she got tired of screaming. "I hate you a little right now." "That's fair." They went back to bed, curled together in the darkness, and managed 3 hours of sleep before Rose woke them again. September brought cooler weather and the first signs that maybe, possibly, they were all going to survive this. Rose started sleeping in longer stretches. Lydia's body began recovering from the birth, though she complained constantly about how different everything felt. "Nothing fits right anymore," she said, trying to button a dress that had fit fine before the pregnancy. "And don't say I look fine because I can see myself in the mirror. I was going to say you look beautiful." "Same thing, both lies." "It's not a lie if I mean it." She gave him a look. "Your daughter needs changing." "She's always my daughter when she needs changing. When she's sleeping, she's our daughter. When she's crying, she's your daughter." "That's how marriage works. Didn't you know?" Despite the exhaustion and the constant work and the way their lives had been completely upended, there were moments of pure joy. Rose's first real smile aimed at Lydia while nursing. The way she gripped Ethan's finger with her tiny hand. The sound of Eleanor singing to her granddaughter, old songs in a language Lydia said was Polish. The town had opinions, of course. When Lydia first brought Rose to church that October, the whispers started immediately. "That baby's big for 3 months, someone said, not quietly enough. "Takes after her mother," someone else responded, and the judgment in the tone was unmistakable. Lydia's shoulders went rigid. Ethan put his hand on the small of her back, a reminder that he was there. But then Mrs. Brennan approached, her fan moving slowly. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward Rose. Lydia hesitated, then nodded. Mrs. Brennan peered at the baby, who stared back with solemn eyes. "She's lovely, healthy, that's what matters." She looked at Lydia directly. "You've done well, Mrs. Calloway. Being a mother isn't easy. You should be proud." It wasn't effusive praise, but coming from Mrs. Brennan, it was significant. "Thank you," Lydia managed. After that, something shifted. Not everywhere, not with everyone, but enough. The women who'd been coldest started thawing. They asked about Rose, shared advice about teething and colic, included Lydia in conversations about children that she'd never been part of before. Motherhood, apparently, was the great equalizer. Winter came again, their second since Lydia had arrived. The house was more prepared this time, better insulated, more firewood stacked, supplies laid in. Rose grew despite the cold, hitting milestones that Eleanor documented with the fierce attention of a devoted grandmother. "First tooth," Eleanor announced in December, Rose gnawing on her finger. "See? Right there." "I don't see anything," Ethan said, squinting. "Because you're not looking properly." "Lydia, come look." Lydia peered into Rose's mouth. "There's definitely something, maybe." "I told you, first tooth at 4 months. She's advanced." "Or she's just a baby with a tooth, Mama." Advanced, Eleanor insisted. Catherine Monroe stopped by one afternoon in January with a proposition. The boarding house is expanding, she said, warming her hands by the fire. I'm adding 4 more rooms, which means more laundry. I know we reduced your load, and I understand if you can't take on more, but I thought I'd ask. The pay would be substantial. Lydia looked at Eleanor, a silent conversation happening between them. How much more work? Eleanor asked. Maybe double what you're doing now. I'd need someone dedicated, reliable. And I'd pay accordingly, enough that you wouldn't need to take other jobs. We'll think about it, Lydia said. After Catherine left, Eleanor spoke first. We should do it. Mama, it's too much. You can't. I can if we hire help, a girl from town, someone young who can do the heavy lifting. Eleanor's eyes were bright. This is good money, Lydia. Real money, the kind that means security. We have security. We have Ethan's generosity. That's not the same thing. The words hit Ethan harder than they should have. He'd thought they were past this, past Lydia and Eleanor feeling like dependents instead of family, but apparently not. This is your home, he said carefully. Both of you. Rose, you're not dependent on my generosity. You're my family. We know that, Eleanor said gently. But a woman needs her own money, Ethan, her own security that no man can take away. Surely you understand that. He did, even though he hated it. Then take the job. Both of you. We'll make it work. They hired a girl named Margaret, 15, quiet, desperate for work. She came 3 days a week to help with laundry. The arrangement worked better than expected. The money was good. Eleanor bloomed under the increased responsibility, her sense of purpose renewed. But by March, it was clear something was wrong with her. She moved slower, tired more easily. Her hands, which had been improving, started shaking again, worse than before. It's just the cold, she insisted when Lydia questioned her. My joints don't like winter. It's almost spring, Mama. Then it's old age. The bodies wear out. It happens. But Lydia wasn't convinced. Neither was Ethan. They watched Eleanor carefully, saw the way she winced when she thought no one was looking, the way she gripped the table when she stood. In April, Eleanor collapsed while hanging laundry. Margaret found her on the ground, conscious but unable to stand. They got her inside, sent for Dr. Morrison. He examined her with more care than Ethan expected. Her heart, he said finally, his voice grave. It's weak. Has been for a while, probably. The pneumonia last year didn't help. What can we do? Lydia asked, her voice steady but her hands shaking. Rest. Complete rest. No work, no stress. Keep her comfortable. Morrison's expression was sympathetic. I'm sorry. There's no cure for a worn-out heart. Just time. After he left, Eleanor looked at her daughter with clear eyes. Don't cry yet. I'm not dead. Mama, I mean it. I'm still here. We'll deal with this like we deal with everything else, practically. She settled back against her pillows. Though, I suppose this means Margaret gets a raise. Lydia laughed despite the tears streaming down her face. Eleanor lived through spring and into summer, but she faded incrementally. Some days were good. She'd sit in her chair sewing, playing with Rose, telling stories about Lydia's childhood. Other days she couldn't get out of bed. Her breathing labored, her skin gray. Lydia balanced caring for her mother and her daughter with the kind of grim determination Ethan had come to recognize. She never complained, never broke down where anyone could see. But at night, in their bed, she clung to him with desperate strength. I'm not ready, she whispered one night. I know that's selfish. I know she's in pain, but I'm not ready to lose her. I know. She's all I had for so long, just her and me against everything. And now... Her voice broke. I don't know who I am without her. You're you. You're my wife. Rose's mother, strong and capable and stubborn as hell. He held her tighter. And you're not going to be alone. I'm here. I'm always going to be here. Promise? Promise. Eleanor died on a Tuesday in late July, quietly in her sleep. Lydia found her in the morning, went to wake her for breakfast, and realized she was gone. She didn't scream, didn't cry, just stood there for a long moment, then came to find Ethan. Mama's dead. The funeral was well attended. More people than Ethan expected, including several he didn't recognize. Apparently, Eleanor had made more friends in Ashford than any of them realized. Women who'd hired her for sewing work. Men whose wives she'd helped with difficult births. The Reverend spoke about kindness and strength, about a woman who'd come west with almost nothing and built a life anyway. Lydia stood dry-eyed through all of it, Rose in her arms. She accepted condolences with grace, thanked people for coming, acted like she was fine. She wasn't fine. For 2 weeks after the funeral, she went through the motions, cooked, cleaned, cared for Rose, did the laundry work with Margaret's help. But there was an emptiness in her eyes that scared Ethan. "Talk to me," he said one evening after Rose was asleep. "About what?" "About how you're feeling, about your mother, about anything." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You haven't cried once." "What good would crying do? She's still dead." Lydia's voice was flat. "Crying won't bring her back." "No, but it might make you feel better." "I don't want to feel better. I want her back." Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just held her, and eventually she fell asleep against him, still dry-eyed. The breaking point came 3 weeks after the funeral. Ethan came in from the fields to find Lydia sitting on the floor of Eleanor's room, surrounded by her mother's things. Dresses, sewing supplies, letters, trinkets. Rose was crying in the other room, but Lydia didn't seem to hear her. "Lydia?" She looked up, her face devastated. "I can't do this." "Can't do what?" "Any of it. Be a mother, be a wife. Exist without her. I can't." Her breathing was coming faster. "Everything hurts and I can't make it stop and I don't know what to do." Ethan picked up Rose first, soothed her, then came back to Lydia. Sat on the floor beside her. "You don't have to do anything right now except breathe. That's not enough." "It is for now." He sat with her while she finally cried. Great racking sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for her mother, for the years of struggle, for every time she'd been made to feel less than, for the loneliness she'd carried most of her life. She cried until she was exhausted, until there was nothing left. And then, slowly, she started healing. It wasn't fast. Grief didn't work like that, but incrementally, day by day, Lydia came back to herself. She laughed at Rose's antics, started taking interest in the ranch again, began making plans for the future. "I want to teach," she said one evening in September. "Teach what?" "Reading, writing, basic numbers. There's no school here. Children they work on farms, help their parents, never learn anything." She looked at him. "I could teach them. Start small, maybe just a few students. Use our front room." "You know how to teach?" "I can read and write better than most people in this town. That's enough to start." Her eyes were brighter than they'd been in weeks. "Mama always said education was important, that it was the one thing no one could take from you. I want to give that to these kids." "Then do it. You don't think it's crazy? I think it's brilliant." She started with 3 students that October, children of families too poor to send them away to school. She charged almost nothing, just enough to cover supplies. Word spread. By November, she had 7 students. By January, 12. The front room transformed into a classroom. Ethan built desks with scrapwood. Lydia made primers by hand, painstakingly copying lessons she remembered from her own limited schooling. It was chaotic and imperfect, and she loved it. "They're learning," she told Ethan one evening, her face flushed with excitement. "Really learning. Tommy Harrison read an entire page today without help, and Sarah Mitchell solved all her arithmetic problems correctly. You're good at this." "I am, aren't I?" She sounded surprised. "I never thought. I always assumed I was only good for physical work, but this, teaching, it feels right." "Your mother would be proud." Lydia's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Yeah, she would. The school grew. By the second year, Lydia had 20 students and a waiting list. The town council approached her about making it official, paying her a salary, building a proper schoolhouse. "It's too much," she told Ethan. "They want me to teach 40 students. I can't manage 40. "Then hire an assistant." "With what money?" "The salary they're offering. It's substantial." She looked at the numbers he'd written down. Her eyes widened. "This can't be right." "It is. They're serious about this, Lydia. They want a real school. and they want you to run it. Why me? Because you're good at it, because the children love you, because you've proven you can do it. He took her hand. Because you deserve it. The new schoolhouse was built that summer, funded partially by the town and partially by Thomas Garrett, who announced he was investing in Ashford's future. It had real desks, a chalkboard, windows that let in good light. Lydia hired Margaret, now 18 and educated enough to help, as her assistant. On the first day of school in the new building, 32 students showed up. Lydia stood at the front of the room, looked at all those expectant faces, and felt something close to complete. That evening, sitting on their porch with Rose playing in the yard, now 4 years old and fearless, Lydia said, "I never thought I could have this." Have what? Respect, purpose, a life that matters beyond just surviving. She leaned against him. When I stepped off that stagecoach, I thought the best I could hope for was being useful, being tolerated, but this, she gestured at the ranch, the house, Rose. This is more than I ever imagined. You built it. We built it, together. Ethan thought about that first day, the shock he'd felt, the moment of doubt. Thought about how close he'd come to sending her away, how different his life would be if he had. "I'm glad you stayed," he said. "I'm glad you asked me to." Rose ran up to them, her dress dirty from playing. "Mama, there's a bird's nest in the tree. Can we look?" "After dinner." "Please, just for a minute." Lydia sighed but stood. "1 minute. Then you're washing up." Ethan watched them walk to the tree together, Rose chattering excitedly while Lydia listened with patient attention. His wife, his daughter, his family. The years continued. Rose grew strong and smart, learning to read before she was 5, helping in the schoolhouse when she was old enough. She had her mother's determination and her father's quiet steadiness, and she moved through the world with a confidence that came from being loved completely. Lydia's school became the heart of Ashford. She taught reading, writing, arithmetic, history. She taught children to think critically, to question, to dream beyond the boundaries of their small town. Former students went on to universities, to careers, to lives they'd never imagined possible. The ranch prospered. Ethan expanded it gradually, bought more land, increased his herd. The work was hard but satisfying, and he had help now. Daniel had stayed on, was basically family at this point, running half the operation on his own. Catherine Monroe retired, sold the boarding house to a young couple. She moved into a small house near the school and spent her days volunteering, helping Lydia with the youngest students. Thomas Garrett, of all people, became something like a friend. Not close, but respectful. He invested in several of Ashford's growing businesses, including a bakery that bought Lydia's bread recipes. The town changed, grew, new families moved in. Old prejudices faded, though never completely disappeared. But Ashford became a place where the mail-order bride who'd been judged so harshly was now Mrs. Calloway, the school teacher everyone respected. On their 10th anniversary, Ethan took Lydia into town for dinner at the new restaurant that had opened. It was fancy by Ashford standards, tablecloths, multiple courses, wine. "This is too much," Lydia said, though she was smiling. "It's not enough, but it's what I can do." He raised his glass. "To 10 years. To 10 years, like," she clinked her glass against his, "and to however many more we get." "What's the best part been? Of these 10 years?" She considered. Rose, obviously. The school. But also, she reached across the table, took his hand. Also learning that I could be loved, that I was worth loving. You gave me that. You already had that. I just saw it. Same thing. They talked through dinner about everything and nothing. Rose's latest antics at school, the new section of land Ethan was thinking about buying, plans for expanding the schoolhouse again, ordinary things that made up an extraordinary life. Walking home under the stars, Lydia said, "Do you ever think about that first day, when I arrived?" "Sometimes." "Do you wish it had gone differently?" "Never. Not once." He stopped, turned to face her. "You were the best unexpected thing that ever happened to me. Even though I wasn't what you expected? Especially because of that. What I expected was ordinary. What I got was you. She kissed him, there on the street where everyone could see and didn't care who was watching. The years accumulated. Rose grew into a young woman, brilliant and ambitious. She went east to college, something Lydia had insisted on, had saved for religiously. She wrote long letters home about her classes, her plans, her dreams. Ethan's hair went gray. Lydia's body changed further, her joints sometimes stiff, but she was still strong, still vital. She taught until she was 60, then retired and immediately got restless. "I need something to do," she told Ethan. "You've earned rest." "Rest is boring." She started a literacy program for adults who'd never learned to read, taught evening classes in her front room, just like she'd started all those years ago. She was relentless about education, about second chances, about the idea that it was never too late to learn. Daniel got married, had children of his own. The Calloways became like grandparents to his kids, even though they weren't blood relatives. Family, they'd all learned, was more about choice than biology. On a spring evening when Lydia was 65 and Ethan was 67, they sat on the same porch they'd sat on countless times before. The ranch stretched out before them, green and alive. In the distance, they could see the schoolhouse, closed for the day but waiting for tomorrow's students. "We did all right, didn't we?" Lydia said. "Better than all right. I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For saying yes that first day. For not sending me away. For seeing past what everyone else saw." She took his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally after decades of practice. "For loving me." "You don't need to thank me for that. Loving you was the easiest thing I ever did." "Liar. I was difficult. Sometimes. But worth it. Always worth it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set. Rose was coming home for a visit next month, bringing someone special she wanted them to meet. The school had a new teacher now, young and enthusiastic, carrying on Lydia's work. The ranch was secure, would be passed down to Rose when they were gone. Everything they'd built together would continue after them. Lydia leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. "If you could go back, knowing everything that was going to happen, all the hard parts, all the struggles, would you still choose me?" He didn't hesitate. "Every time. In every version of this story, I'd choose you. Even though I wasn't what you expected. Especially because of that." He kissed the top of her head. "You were better than anything I could have expected. You were real." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I love you, still, after all this time." "I know. I love you too." The stars came out one by one, and they sat together in the gathering darkness. Two people who'd started as strangers built a life from nothing and proved that worth wasn't something given by the world. It was something you created day by day, through the choices you made and the love you gave. The ranch house glowed with lamplight. Somewhere inside, the clock chimed the hour. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments to navigate together. But tonight, they had this, the porch, the stars, each other. After everything they'd been through, after all the judgments and struggles and victories, they had built something that mattered. They had built a home, a family, a legacy. And that, Lydia thought, as she held her husband's hand, was more than enough. It was everything.